to the Gresham-Barlow Board of Education, Wednesday, September 18, 2024, regular work session. Roll call. We have Chris Howitt, Chair, Kathy Keithley, Vice Chair, Blake Peterson, Director, David Ligatich, Director, Colin Rugelman, Director, Dr. Myra Gomez, Director, and Dr. Sean Barnes, Director. In attendance is James Hughes, Superintendent. Our first item of business is to approve the meeting agenda. There is one change to the agenda, the removal of item C, action item. So if there could be a motion to approve the agenda with the removal of action item C.
I move to approve the meeting agenda with the removal of C1.
Second.
It's been moved by Blake, seconded by David, to approve the meeting agenda with the removal of item C1. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you. First thing that we are going to do is recess into executive session under personnel ORS 192.660, friend 2, friend B. And I believe Tracy has got that. And Myra will put us, not Myra, Sarah will put us into executive.
Can you read the full thing? for executive
Where's
session?
it? Yes, on the other page. Executive sessions are closed to the public. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made in executive session.
I see him.
So Sarah, you ready to take us out of executive session?
Yep.
And we're moving into, are we out?
Yep.
Okay, so we are back from our executive session. No decision was made. And we are moving on to item D, interviews and selection, the superintendent search for interviews. And Kathy, I believe you're gonna go ahead and take the, who is,
I'll just start it because the, so do you have the copies that you?
that's right.
So we received 5 firm proposals. The superintendent search committee reviewed them all five, and the ratings, the first sheet that Sarah's giving you, we wanted to take just a few minutes. The first interview is gonna be at 6:45 and go to 7:30. And, we wanted to kind of give you what our thoughts were, and Chris did want to see all five of them, which was great. If you focused on the bottom two of the sheet, Northwest Leadership and HYA, those are the two that we're, interviewing. And so these are the things that kind of, you know, the conversations that we had and the committees reviewed all of those. And if there's something that I missed that you didn't catch before, I want you guys to, you know, throw in too, maybe some questions that the board has. Just to familiarize yourself a little bit, because the questions, the interview questions were a little bit more in-depth, referencing after we had done our review, and a pretty thorough reading of all the proposals. And so you guys might have a different question that you need answered, either while we're interviewing, and we're able to, because we only went to two, give it for 45 minutes. And of course, it helped that this termination hearing was, moved too. So, we just kind of want to have a conversation to get you, so that you get the most out of the interview process. At the end, we'll have a 10 or 15 minute break, I can't remember, between the two interviews for you to take a break and then maybe write your evaluation sheets. Because the next page is the question, and I did throw some scores in there, but you know, it was just something to give you a reference point to. So with that, I'm not sure the committee, you want to maybe review how you got to the top two, or what, you know, spoke to, or maybe other board members want to have questions about that. Preparing us for the interview.
I think that, it's a lot of information, a lot of reading, you know, we got at 5 o'clock, I think I was up till 2 a.m. Literally digging through each one, and a lot of them were, all five of them, I can say, were very similar in their wording, but there was a few that stood out, specifically with the way that they were going to work with, what kind of stuff they have, on a back end that we can go into and kind of look at what the process is and stuff like that. The other one was their representatives, even though they say that they're, you know, located in the Northwest and all this other stuff, they literally have a representative here. It was how well would we perceive ourselves to be working with that representative, what they've done in the past. And then, like, I'll give you an example. One person, I believe, was a superintendent, but would also be our representative. Well, we all know James works $300 a week. How would they be able to give that time to us on the other end, right? So there was a lot of digging in from my side of it, from the business side of it. It was really digging into the financials. What do we get for the money that we're spending? I think Myra had a different perspective about how she was going through them. Kathy had a different perspective on how she was going through them. And then that final kind of meeting we had together, we, you know, whether there were some things we disagreed on, there were some things we agreed on. But we finally got it down to these two. Myra, I think you can, if you want to talk about kind of your process, but I will tell you, it was, Kathy did an amazing job putting those together. There was a lot of thought, a lot of effort into it.
Yeah, I agree, that Kathy did a great job, putting this together. I looked for, I wanted to see that the representatives that would be working with us were people who have experience in education, the people who preferably live in the area as well, who would be familiar with the community. I also wanted representation of our students in our community, all of our students in our community. So even the firm that you mentioned, David, that had a superintendent, a local superintendent, yeah, he is busy, but also he is somebody that I trust and know his dedication to equity and to serving students of color and underrepresented communities. So others, I just didn't like the language they used. It was very antiquated language, and I spoiled them like that. I felt like they were copying and pasting from old templates and didn't bother to tailor the proposals to us. And there was another one that I scored high that did reference our district and was specifically recruiting or looking to work with us.
I think a couple of oversights that became clear to me. As David said, the process is so similar in terms of meeting with stakeholders, crafting what the qualifications are, meeting with the board and doing the process is similar. But there are some nuances and differences. David made a good point. If you have an outside firm, they lead the effort with their experience, and then they do bring in people from, closer in the area to do the actual hands-on work. They're involved too, but they don't do it all. That's why it was interesting. We said, what's the qualification and experience of the firm? And then what is the qualification and experience of the individual people working on our contract? And that kind of came to light, that the company has been around for a long time, but the individuals assigned to our recruitment may not have. So, and not that matter. I mean, it does matter, but it may not be as important to some of you. I think it's going to come down to experience and what the firms offer. While the process is the same, their back end office, some of the communication tools that they use to communicate with the board are absolutely different. And I would assume that those would come up in the presentation. I thought we would get everything with the questions, but we did, they were gonna have just 5 minutes for the overview and they were both surprised by that. So I'm so glad that we were able to give them a bit more time. I said 10 minutes for the overview. Sarah, is that what you told them?
Yep.
And so I'm hoping that we have enough time. If we each want to ask a question, there are only 6 and there's 7 of us. We can take turns if you want, but any questions you see, anything about, you were able to look at these questions beforehand. Is there something that we missed or you want to add?
Well, I'm gonna add one more thing. I think it was very nice, to be able to look at this from 3 completely different lenses.
Mm.
There was a lot of stuff that that I had no clue. There's a lot of stuff that Kathy thought and that she had no clue. With my business background, looking at the finances, it was like, whoa, we do kind of. So it's very nice to be able to collaborate and kind of catch it.
Yeah, question number 5, I will say too, that was confusing a little bit for us as we were reviewing the RFPs because they had a base figure and then they had all these add-ons. Well, when David calculated one, it was the base and then you added on all these add-ons. It's like, whoa, that changes the whole perspective of that quote. And then I looked and saw add-ons to other quotes. And that's specifically why the question is, what's your base? Because like, for instance, one of the ones I read, the base includes advertising. But if you want to broaden the advertising, then you'd add on. So I want them to say, what do you recommend as an essential add-on and why? The other thing is that, and this was interesting too, it came out. There are firms that communicate with a pool of candidates and they keep that communication flow going. So they don't start from scratch. There was one of the firms that said, we don't believe in that approach. We think we should just post it. And so one of the firms actually that we're interviewing said that they don't just post on their website their own openings. It's any firm's openings because they really feel like that gives them a depth and breadth. And they have some things that protect us too, like anybody that comes through there, whoever it was. And I think most of them said this actually, that if they hire somebody, then they have a commitment that they won't leave the district in 2 to 3, 4 to 5, 5 to 7, whatever it was. So we have some assurances that they won't be recruited because, part of it is, what is your success rate? How long do your superintendents serve? How good was the match for your school? So anyway, at this point, it'll, be a feeling for your confidence level and the trust that we see in some of the interviews. And frankly, the information is going to be important, but also the firm's philosophy and how they approach us to communicate, I think is going to play an important role too.
So before we get, I just had but I hope be a quick question about how you guys got down to the 2 that we're talking to tonight. When I see 1 in this ranking listing that Kane should have been number two, perhaps, I'm not quite sure what. I can't quite tell what your numbers are.
It seems like the top two aren't even, like when you look at total.
Well, I think the 5 means the worst.
Yeah.
Is that
Oh,
correct?
I was.
I had the same problem, but
Oh,
I
I
still,
thought-
yeah, I still looked at what we had in here.
Yes.
And so I was just surprised, that one group that had lower number, which I would think means is better. You know, people liked it more than their 1, 2, 3 compared to one of the ones that we're gonna be talking to tonight.
Right, so let me just approach this and then you guys
Okay.
can add in. We had an evaluation sheet that was scored.
Uh-huh.
And based on those numbers, that's where our rankings came from.
Mhm.
But there was a lot of, for instance, David ranked based on this, which we all did all by ourselves, ranked a firm,
Five.
higher or lower because the costing wasn't clear. So when I clarified in our discussion what the actual costing was, he's like, oh, I see. So that would mean it would, to me, then that would move up. So things did change a little bit. And because David was out of town and didn't have his scoring sheets, we weren't able to put the scores together. So I just did a brain dump, literally sat in the office after our meeting and did a brain dump and captured as much as I could. But I think, Chris, a lot of it, what you'll see is a clarification. It's like, oh, I didn't know that. So that might change my ranking a little bit.
I appreciate.
Does that help?
Yeah, and I hope during the questions it will. I'm still, not 100% sure, but I'm at 85%.
Well, I think when we were collaborating at the end, it was all three of us, and Myra would say something, oh, wow, I didn't even look at that. And then Kathy would say something, and somebody else would say, oh, I didn't even look at that either. And so when we had our initial rankings, we were kind of able to talk to each other about why they went that way or why they went this way. And it made more sense at the end.
And
Yeah, I think we finalized our ranking through conversation, not necessarily through the scores. We discussed the, and then through our conversations, we moved the rankings.
yeah, it did give us the starting point.
Yeah.
I think too that initially when we ended the meeting, we were gonna meet with the top 3, but then we just found that we just didn't have the time to do that. And I think it was not necessarily a close third, but I mean, I guess that was the feeling of it, not that we had the numbers to show it.
Yeah. Appreciate you guys doing the work and
Yeah.
providing the positives and negatives.
So first, are we ready for, what's our next?
Well, I think that technically they were supposed to start at 6:45. We do want to give each, but we can,
Oh.
I think he's here and available. That's the first one. That's HYA. And they are, located. They went first because they were located someplace else in Illinois, I guess. But in their proposal, they did talk about the local people that would be on the ground. So if we start him at 6:40 and he's ready, then it'll just end 5 minutes early and we can begin the second one 5 minutes early if they're ready, and I'll be the timekeeper. And does anybody want to circle a question that you can ask just to move it around? I'll take one.
Nobody just went that way.
Yeah. Blake. Myra 3, Ollie. You're out, Chris. Sorry.
That's okay.
David.
I mean, the next one should go the other way.
Okay,
And the first one is HYA.
HYA.
Okay.
Are we ready? Are you on?
We are. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Absolutely. Welcome. I'm Kathy Keithley. I'm the kind of chairing the subcommittee that did the search, and I'm not sure if it would be helpful to have introductions or if you want to just jump right into your proposals. You want to do introductions? Okay.
It'd be
So-
great.
I'm Kathy Keithley, the vice chair.
Chris Howard, the chair.
Blake Peterson.
Myra Gomez.
Holly Riggleman.
David Leasich.
And Sean Barnes.
Great, so you guys take it away.
Hey, let me share my screen here real quick. Just give me 1 second. All right, can you see my screen? Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having us. And I also want to say thank you so much for the extra 5 minutes. That's greatly appreciated. So we will keep this to 10 minutes, and then we will certainly answer questions that you have. So my name is Mike Ritchie, and my partner here is Brian Ewert, and we work for HYA. We're both retired superintendents. Our complete bio is in our proposal, so we're not going to waste any of our 10 minutes talking about ourselves. But we've been in education for a very long time. Done numerous searches all across the Midwest, West Coast, Rocky Mountain region. And so we're very experienced search consultants with HYA, and we have a lot of school background as well as superintendents. Brian was the HR director as well. So we know the school climate and what's going on within the schools. So first of all, HYA, yeah, we are based out of Illinois, but keep in mind, we have 130 some associates across the US. And we just to give you an example, we have 17 from California, 5 from Washington, 1 from Oregon. We have 1 out in Nevada, 1 in Montana. So we will utilize those people as well. But Brian and I will be the 2 lead people leading this search if we're lucky enough to get it. We average about 80 searches per year. We have done small districts and very large districts. We've got a great satisfaction rate, and we have got a really comprehensive community engagement piece that we're going to talk about tonight. Our communication is outstanding. We'll get back to you right away. But one of the biggest things we have is that national reach, the recruiting ability that we have. And just we're looking at our partners, you can see them on the screen. So we do partner with AASA. We actually did their search. We do partner with the National Association of School Superintendents. I serve on the executive committee of that. And then we have other partners as well, like the Association of Latino Administrators, the Alliance of Black School Educators. So it's all about networking. It's all about recruiting. And just briefly on this slide, like I said, we do over 80 searches a year. Some years we do 100, but we are one of we are the biggest national search firm. And you can just look at some of our competitors, what we do. But the one thing I really want to stress is the fact that about 75% of the candidates that we place, we've actually recruited. We don't believe, and if you post it, they will come. We really do a robust job recruiting the candidates. And we in our engaged phase, we put together this report where we want to find the best fit for you. So our track record is really, really good. I've done over 40 searches with HYA, and that's over 6.5 years or so. I'm going on 7 years. And of those 40 searches, I've led most of them, but all but 1 superintendent is still in that current district. And that's because of the report we put together looking for the best fit for your district. The other thing that really separates us is our board portal. This is going to be your private website. It's password protected. All of our search information is going to go into the board portal. You're going to see every single application as they come in. Some firms don't allow you to see applications, only the finalists. You will see every single applicant. And we put everything related to the search in this portal. So you'll have access to this, and then we'll talk more into detail about what goes in and how we tier those applicants as they come in. But this is a huge piece for the board because you can just 1 click, you can look on the applicant, and it might be 30 or 40 pages of the application material, but it will be 1 click for you per applicant. So 24/7 it's available to you, and it's very, very handy for all board members.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about what does that signature search look like from Hazard, Young, and Attia. So this is really the heart and the guts of what we do. And it consists of 4 very distinct phases. There's the engage, recruit, select, and transition phases. So during the engage phase, we work with the Board of Education to understand the unique desires and interests and concerns of your community. This is a highly inclusive process for all of your stakeholders. We engage stakeholders through a variety of means, interviews, focus groups, emails, community survey, if that's the desire of the board. And we'll talk just a little bit more about this particular phase because it is so critical to the process. As far as the recruitment phase, we have the ability, as Mike suggested, to tap the widest range of candidates from across the country that meet the requirements that you set forth based on the leadership report that we will produce on your behalf to select the very best candidates to bring them forward. With regards to the select phase, as Mike said, you will have access to all applicant files. This is not true of all firms. However, we will be screening and vetting the candidates throughout the entire process, and we do some preliminary reference checking as well. We will help facilitate and review, and we'll select the top candidates, both for preliminary interviews and final interviews. And we'll talk a little bit more about what those tiered candidates look like and how we get to that part of the process. The transition phase, it will be down the road a bit, but once the new superintendent is in place, we review the process, we'll review the community input, we provide coaching, strategic planning, and goal setting should the Board of Education and the new superintendent want that service as well. And that really does set the stage for a successful transition.
So the other thing about that engagement phase, and we'll talk, I'm sure you'll have questions about that and how we select the focus groups and what we do. But the one focus group we do insist in every district, we do insist on doing focus groups with your high school students. So we want students engaged in this process. This slide just gives you a little idea of some of our past searches and what we use for recruiting and where the candidates have come from. And so I'm just going to pick Littleton, Colorado. We'll just talk about one of them here, I guess. But you can see we had 24 applicants, 17 from out of state. So we had about 71% of out-of-state applicants. And then tier 1 is the strongest of the applicants. We put them in 3 tiers when we do we present the slate to the board. So tier 1 will be the strongest, the best fit, great match for your district. Tier 2 is going to be, they're pretty good, but we found something as we did our vetting. And then tier 3, we're going to tell you point blank, you don't want to interview anyone in tier 3 because of what we found in their track record. So we want to make sure it's that right fit. So in this situation in Littleton, you can see from our top 1 tier, we had 4 from Colorado, 1 from Michigan, 1 from Georgia, 1 from Indiana, 1 from Maryland, 1 from Wisconsin, 1 from California, 1 from Washington. And then the person that board selected was from Indiana. And then you can see for Aurora, Colorado, we had 32 applicants. That one happened to come from Colorado. And then for Lincoln, Nebraska, we had 22 applicants, and that superintendent was selected was from Iowa. So again, that real strong national reach that we have. These are just some of the searches. These are, and by no, not even close to all the searches that we've done. Brian and I worked very closely together. We did a number of these together. I was a lead with some other partners as well. So what we try to do is we try to partner up with an associate in that area as well. And so you can just kind of see some of those key searches that we did. And then again, I mentioned that we both have a great amount of experience throughout our educational career. Timeline is important. It's essential. And so this is a tentative timeline that we put together. And what we do in our planning meeting with the board is we will meet with the board and we'll go through this, and then we'll actually, where it says like, mid-October or late October, we'll actually come up with dates that will go into that slot in that planning meeting. So when we leave that planning meeting with the board, the entire search is laid out. You have everything in your calendar. You know exactly when the survey is going to open. You know when it's going to close. You know when the first round interviews are. You know when the final rounds are, the day in the district. So you will have everything laid out. But again, this is your search. This is your calendar. And we want to make sure that we adhere to your timetable. Boards usually have a lot of questions regarding the calendar and the process. And so at this point, we're getting close to our 10 minutes. And so we do have extra slides. We didn't know if we would finish all of them or not. So I would encourage you to go through and look at the other slides that we put in our presentation. And if you do have questions on any of those slides, please feel free to ask us about those slides and anything else about our process. So we stuck to our 10 minutes, and we'll be happy to entertain any questions you have.
Thank you, Mike. We do have 6 prepared questions that each board member will ask you. It might very well mean that some of those slides could come up in the answering of some of these questions if it's pertinent to that. So feel free to do that. I'm gonna take the first one, and it is describe a little bit how you define the ideal criteria for the ideal superintendent, and how will you customize that for our district's needs?
Yeah, so that engagement piece that Brian talked about is huge. So we're going to engage, we're going to conduct, 20, 25 different focus groups. We're going to involve your staff, your support staff, your certified staff, your parents, your community members, your business leaders, your any civic groups, anyone, again, in this planning meeting, you're going to help us determine what groups you want us to interview. I mentioned students already, and then we're going to ask them, what strengths the district has. We're going to ask them, what are the challenges? Because every district has challenges. And then we're going to say, what characteristics are you looking for in your next superintendent? We take all the information that from the focus groups, the town hall meetings, the interviews, we interview board members individually. We do the online survey. We take all of that information, and then we present to you a leadership profile report. It's a very robust report. It's usually around 30 pages. It's going to really highlight your district, and that's the piece we're looking for the best fit for your district. So Brian and I take that report, we go through it. As we recruit, we want to make sure we match the candidate to that report that can do a really good job. And so it's really critical. And that's one of the reasons why our track record is so good, is because we find the best fit. And we will tell you point blank, don't hire someone just to hire someone. We will be with you until you find the person you want. If it takes a year, it takes a year. But and there's no extra charge. We want the best person. We've got our 2-year guarantee, and we will make sure that you have someone who your community and this board really wants as their next superintendent. So Brian, did I miss anything?
We'll just reiterate what you said about the unique nature of the leadership report. Having seen many of these, no 2 leadership reports from any districts are the same. There might be some similar characteristics, but they are very unique to school districts, and we go after those people who match those characteristics.
Great, thank you.
Gentlemen, the second question is, how will you assess both professional qualifications and cultural fit within our district?
Brian, want to go ahead?
Yeah, I think we've been doing this long enough where you can get a real sense in our preliminary interviews and screenings, and then also our blind reference checking as to who these people really are if we don't know them yet. People are pretty honest with us, and through our questioning and through our research, through our due diligence of these candidates, we're able to find pretty clearly if these folks will match what this district is looking for. In every single one of the searches that I've been involved in, you will come across candidates that, as we start doing the deep searches, the deep reference checking, that they're not a match, that they've got things in their background that simply don't match the goals and the objectives of a particular school district. So we move on. But I think mostly it's due to our experience, it's due to our reference checking, and it's due to our ability to network with people who know people.
Yeah, and we pre-screen every single applicant. So we spend 45 minutes to an hour with every applicant. And Brian already hit it. They're going to give you a reference letter or give you a reference. We know it's going to be glowing. So we tried to do the blind references where we will call people they don't list, just to make sure that what the other person said is accurate. So we'll do that as well. And then the other thing with our national presence, I already talked about the associates, the networking that we do. We've got the ability to see every single application for every HYA position that's out there. And so we can see if we're not doing the search, let's say there's a search on the East Coast, we're not doing it. We can go into our database and we can see who applies for that search. We can see who they slated. We can see who their finalists are. So we will have access to every single applicant for every search HYA does as well. Another big piece with our recruiting is the fact that we go to so many national conferences and state conferences. If you went to the National School Board Association, you saw us there in our booth and talking to potential candidates. If we go to the National Superintendent Conference, we are there, again, recruiting, we're in the job fair. And so the word of mouth is really, really critical, and that networking is so powerful.
Thank you.
Can you share an example of a challenging superintendent search that you've conducted and how you overcame the difficulty?
You were breaking up. Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes. Can you share an example of a challenging superintendent search that you've conducted and how you overcame the difficulty?
Okay. So let's see, Brian. Let's do one that we did together. So which one do you want to do?
Go ahead and pick our recent one in Colorado.
Okay, so we're not going to mention the district's name, but we did a district where when we did the focus groups, we heard a lot about micromanaging from the board. We heard a lot of the board was in power. We heard a lot of things that were kind of negative about the district. And so then we kind of went with, okay, how can we turn this around? What can we do? And then the thing that we do is when we have this report, we put right in that report. I think our exact words in that one were the board needs to stay in their lane. And we talked to the board members about, okay, you hired us to do your search. You want to do a national search, and people will do their homework with the district. And so they're going to know the board's behavior. They're going to know the outcome of the board. And so if it's a dysfunctional board, you're not going to get good applicants. If it's a very well-oiled machine board, you're going to get outstanding applicants. And so a lot of that dynamics really plays into, what we find out. And so we're honest with the candidates and we're honest with the board. And so those focus groups become essential, that report becomes essential, and people love that they have the opportunity to talk to us in those focus groups. And we highly insist that the board members do not attend the focus groups because we want the community, the staff to speak openly and freely. That's why we do an interview with every single board member, an individual interview, so you get your say for this report as well. So Brian, what do you want to add about that search?
At the end of the day, I think that the leadership report really was eye-opening for the Board of Education. I think that internally they knew that they functioned and as a dysfunctional leadership group, and they didn't really focus on policy. It's really about personalities and personal interests. And I think it kind of shook them a bit to hear what the community said. They were very appreciative of the honest report. The community did not trust HYA at first to actually publish what we were hearing in our community focus groups. We said we're absolutely going to publish it because that's what we do. The board appreciated that. And interestingly enough, they hired an outstanding superintendent who knew everything about the district coming in and knew what she was getting into. And then I would also say that the board, realizing the notable dysfunction that the community had pointed out, decided to hire some board training facilitators. And they have been working with those facilitators already this fall, trying to understand how they can be a better board. So I think good came from that leadership report, almost in a strategic manner, where they now have I guess, a North Star, if you will, to guide them and to think differently about their board actions.
Thank
Great,
you.
thank you.
I have the next question, and I think you touched on a little bit in your presentation, but the question is, how will you keep the board and other stakeholders informed throughout the search process?
So with the board, we talked about the portal. So everything goes into the portal, and we do a weekly update to the board. And again, it goes into the portal, so you'll see that weekly update. We work with your webmaster, your technology person, to create a district search website or web page. And so we want them to post the focus group schedule. We want them to post the time the timeline. Once you get down to finalists, you're actually posting the resumes of the finalists. We do a day in a district. I think that's unique. And so we'll bring in your 2 or 3 finalists, and they'll spend 1 full day in your district, and they'll do a number of meet and greets. And then we'll have a QR code where the people who attended the meet and greets can give instant feedback to the board. It goes to a spreadsheet right to the board, right into the board portal. And we ask 2 questions. We ask, what excites you about this person? If this person were hired as the next superintendent, what would really excite you? Why do you like this person? And then the other question is, what would concern you if this person were hired? We don't want them to rank the finalists because we're very clear it's the board's hire, but the board would really appreciate your input. And so that QR code, that instant feedback is a great way for your constituents, your residents, your staff to give board instant feedback as they're doing these meet and greets for that day in the district.
All right, good evening, gentlemen. Could you provide details about your proposal costs? For example, what is in the base rate? What are the additional add-on services? What do we need to know about the add-on services, and why would we need them?
Sure. So the base rate for the search is $24,500. And that's going to include all your community engagement, your interviews, your focus groups, your town hall meetings. Presenting will be there to present the leadership report. And we present that leadership report in open session at a board meeting. It's a public document, and we encourage you to post it on your website as well. The board portal for all communication includes recruitment, screening, the slate presentation, interview, protocol. If you want any help with contract negotiations, we will do that as well. So that's our base fee. Then there's travel cost, and we did put in, we have a cap on the travel cost as well. That's in the proposal, so we won't exceed that. If we do exceed that dollar amount, it comes out of our base fee. So it's out of our pocket if we do exceed that amount. Then where the prices might differ a little bit is it depends what you want for advertising. So as you probably realize, advertising can be very expensive. So what we include in the base fee is to advertise on the HYA website, which is basically a national advertising in itself, because we don't just list our searches. And I think we have about 18 to 20 searches posted right now on our website that we are doing, but we have well over 100 all the other firms across the US. We have their searches, their positions posted there as well. And we do that because we know candidates like to come to our HYA website because they can go to one website and see all the searches. So that posting there is included in the base price. All of our social media is included in the base price as well for advertising. And then because I'm on the executive committee of the National Superintendent Association, they allow us to post our openings in their newsletter that goes out to over 25,000 people. It's just a very short 2-page newsletter. It goes out. And so that's all included. Where you would have additional costs for advertising, we do encourage you to advertise in your state association. Every state has a state association where they allow administrative openings to be posted. Some states are free. Some states there's the cost. So that cost can be up to like $500 or so for a state advertising package. And then in the planning meeting, we'll talk to the board about, do you really want to do the big national push? Do you want to do the Ed Week, the AASA, all the other online national places to advertise that are out there? And we'll walk you through all of those. And that is on average about $3,500 if you want to do that big national piece as well. And then we have a great norm reference research-based survey. If you want that, that is a $2,000 add-on, and we can do that survey in any language that you want as well. And so most districts, except the real small ones that use HYA, almost all districts take the survey. So the districts that sometimes don't take it would be the very, very small districts. And I don't know if you saw this in a proposal, but we have done searches in districts for under 500 students to over 640,000 students. That happens to be LA, the 640,000. So we've done very small, very large districts. But that survey is a really good, again, engagement piece for your community. And then that third-party background check, if you want that, that's between $1,100 and $1,900. That's done by a private investigation company, and you normally would do that on your loan finalists, especially if they're from out of state. But that is going to verify their college degree, their transcripts. It's going to verify their degrees. It's going to anything criminal. It's going to a driver, motor vehicle. It's going to go through all of their any credit card trouble, mortgage trouble, late payments. It's going to show everything about this person as well. So it's very, very comprehensive background check. And again, looking at the importance of this job, board members doing their due diligence and looking at what your budget is. And for this executive director, superintendent, CEO, almost all districts take that final comprehensive background check as well, because it's so thorough. So those are the add-on costs. But again, we talk about all of that in that board planning meeting.
I have one follow-up before you go, Sean.
I have two follow-ups.
Okay, so the background check, you do all the preliminary background checks and references that you do, like the
Correct.
things you talked about. So this is only for the finalists, and that's the cost for one person.
Correct. And so when the board makes that motion, usually it's we're going to recommend this person pending contract negotiations and final background check.
Okay, great. And Myra had a couple questions.
Yeah, you mentioned that you do community forums and focus groups. We have about 112 languages represented. Our top ones are Spanish, Russian, Arabic, I believe, if I remember that presentation correctly. What's your capacity to engage multilingual students and families so that we include all voices?
So we did the Aurora, Colorado search. They spoke 160 languages there. We did multiple focus groups in multiple languages. We work with your communications person to help us come up with some interpreters in your area or your school district. And so we are used to doing numerous focus groups in multiple languages. And that's, again, the survey can be done in any language.
So if you're working with our staff, does that require additional hours for them?
It would be additional time for your interpreter, only your interpreter, if they were present at a meeting.
And who pays for that?
Normally the district does.
So that would be a negotiated point for us.
Correct. We could negotiate that.
Yep.
And then another thing that I noticed in your proposal is you mentioned that you have a very diverse team, but our consultants are two white men. How are their lenses taken or used for our benefit?
Brian, you want that? You want me to take that?
It kind of was garbled at the end.
So your proposal mentions that you have a very diverse team of consultants as an asset. How is that asset going to benefit us if the two of you are our consultants?
Well, if I understand the question, it's still a little bit garbled, but you know, we do work with a very diverse set of associates that do the exact same work that we do, and men and women of color from across the nation. So we are constantly in contact with many associates, not just Mike and I being two old white guys on the screen, and asking their input on our process, getting recommendations on great candidates that they've come across in their searches as well. There are we do have other associates that will be working on the backside of this particular process. Mike, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we have when you look at all of our associates, and we're in contact with numerous associates every day for our searches, we have about 40% that represent the minorities, minority people as well. So when you look at what we offer, what we do, we really, our diversity is big. Our company is owned by a female, and she's phenomenal. And so I think we have the stats somewhere on our website that we have about 40% or so of our associates that are unrepresented. And so that's big for us. And like I said, we talk to our associates on a daily basis. If Brian and I may be the face of your district, but we may, as an example, we may load up on focus groups that we can't cover. So we may have to bring in an associate, from California or from Washington that may be a person of color or maybe a minority as well. So just because Brian already said it, you've got 2 white guys here tonight, there'll be multiple other people working on this search.
Thank you.
Let me just make one additional comment to that. We are also very careful to make sure that when we're building the slate and the tiers of candidates that we're going to bring forward to the Board of Education, which you will have access to through the portal, we are actively recruiting people of color. We are actively recruiting those people who we typically wouldn't see in the superintendent's chair. That's really important to both of us, but being public educators, that we bring, to the degree that we can, a diverse pool of candidates to this school district.
Great, we have one more question from Chris before Sean answers his question, asks his question.
Okay, mine is just a general, I didn't get one written down, but 3 to 5 words, when I say Gresham, Oregon, what comes to mind?
Could you repeat that, please?
Sure. When I say Gresham, Oregon, 3 to 5 words that come to mind. What do you think of when we say Gresham, Oregon? What do you know about us?
Culture, beauty, landscape, diverse school district.
Portrait of a graduate.
There you go.
You guys have done some really good work in your visioning, your goal setting, and I love that portrait of a graduate. That's powerful work.
Your improvement plan is also phenomenal. You're, always looking for ways to improve.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Sean?
Awesome. So, I've got the fun question. What sets your firm apart from others in terms of securing the best candidates for a superintendent?
I'll start that one. One of the things that I think that Mike and I pride ourselves on in our process, and it's really a nuance, is our communication with the Board of Education is second to none. You will not go 8 hours without hearing back from us if you have questions or comments or concerns about the process or anything that happens to surface. We will be walking side by side the Board of Education. The second thing I think that we pride ourselves in is what it looks like when Mike and I are in front of your community, building that relationship on behalf of the Board of Education, to hear their engaged comments, to hear what their points of pride are for your school district and where their perceived concerns are for the school district and what the future might hold for the school district. I think Mike and I are very, very good at doing that work in front of your community and actually gathering that information and then filtering it and bringing it back to the Board of Education to say, here are the themes that we heard, the good, the bad, and the ugly for the board to consider. And it really does drive a strategic, a position for that new superintendent coming in to have that narrative in front of them. And so I say that's 2 things that I can think of that kind of sets our particular process apart.
I think our track record speaks for itself. And I always tell boards, when you do reference checks, you're going to do a reference check on the 2 firms. You need to ask about the individuals that led the search. It's not about HYA or the other firm. It's about who led those searches. And when you look at our searches, when you call any one of the searches that we have done, I think you're going to hear some pretty outstanding comments about the work and the dedication, how we're so dedicated to the process and how for 4 months, 7 days a week, we are working for you. And that, I think, sets us apart as well. The other thing Brian and I really enjoy getting into those high schools and talking to those high school students. I'm not going to lie, that's our favorite focus group, is meeting with the students. And in the report that we put together, in the report, we break it down by section. And so the board will have a section, the parents will have a section, the staff will have a section, but we also give the students a section. And normally those students are spot on about what's going on across the district. And people will go to that section first and read that section because they want to know, what do the students think of the district and what are their thoughts? So that's really critical. That's a critical piece of our search as well.
Two other items, the board portal. I don't know that any other firms have a portal that works like ours. It is such a powerful tool for the Board of Education to access 24/7 should they need to. And then the last thing I would say is the community survey, which is an add-on. It also is a very powerful tool.
And one more thing I'll add. So, and Brian and I actually did the search together. It was Lincoln, Nebraska. And I always like sharing with the board, what do the students say? What do they think? So here's a direct quote from a student, a sophomore student, a high school student from Lincoln, Nebraska. Here's what he said. The new superintendent needs to have good taste in music, so we know they have good taste in decisions. The new superintendent needs to continue the legacy of previous superintendents and be willing to listen to students, gain input from students, and be open-minded to change. That came from a sophomore in high school.
Yeah.
That's a strong statement.
So there is, that's the end of our formal questions, but I guess if there's any other, we do have time, if anybody else wants to ask something that wasn't asked already before we let them give their. You got yours? Anybody else? Okay, Mike and Brian, anything you'd like to leave us with?
I think you're doing a very good job looking at firms. I believe you had 5 or so that applied. You've got 2 finalists. I want to think that because of our national reach, our national recruiting, I know in your RFP, you mentioned that you're looking for a firm that, let me get it right here, you want the highest standard of recruitment services in the industry. And I really believe we have that. And I'm not just saying that, making that up. You look at all of our searches, you look at what we've done, we look at the districts that we've served. We have the highest recruitment services in the industry. And I think that really does set us apart. But we really appreciate talking to you tonight. Whoever you hire, we want to wish you the best of luck. If it's us, we will work very hard to find you the right fit, best match, and a great superintendent, a great leader.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, 15 minutes, right?
We'll have.
Yeah, but let's wait until Sarah gets there.
So this was so hard. We had it for 30 and then we thought we'd have more because gee, is it not enough? And they probably could have taken 15, but we'll have to keep the second one to the same. So we had them till 7:30 and then we took a 15-minute break for you guys to either make notes about your scores. You can wait until you see the rest of them before we do that. I did not check references. It seemed certainly on the top 5. And so I didn't do that for these top 2 either. We probably should have before we got to this discussion. Whether or not you guys, we deliberate and you're comfortable making a decision, you might want to wait until reference checks are done. I don't know that. One of the interesting things is we'll see what the next ones bring is the report, the summarization of all the focus groups, because that seems pertinent, but anyway, so I don't know, Sarah, whenever they get on, we could just start early.
I like the board portal,
Yeah.
and I like the fact that they post all jobs, so people use them as kind of like the main search area. So it actually attracts a lot more candidates.
I like that tool for us because we can all read and write in English and we can communicate in that way. I'm not convinced with how they're gonna engage all of our community because the survey is an add-on. We have to pay for it. And it's something that they would send out And they said in multiple languages, but we also have a high population of families who do not read and write, even in their own language. And we have 50% students of color. They kept using the word minority. I'm like, okay, if you guys are working with educated people, formally educated people, like, nobody uses that word. So get a clue, especially if you are claiming that you have a diverse team and, you know, you have an equity lens, whatever it is they have in the proposal, that wasn't evident with the two guys that were here.
Which was the one that was the add-on?
That's the community survey.
If we wanted to do the online survey, in addition to all the focus groups that they do.
I didn't really work for.
Yeah. So-
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying, that's a good tool for us. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how long are your recess? 15 minutes? 10.
Do we have any?
Well, let's check back at, I mean, the person, they're not scheduled to go on until 7:45. So if they get here early, we could start, so maybe come back at 7:30.
Do you have any text or something, or maybe say the
Okay, so. Get out of the face. It's not.
Dottie, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah, hear you great.
Okay,
Hi, John and Dave. This is Sarah, the board secretary. We are just finishing up a recess really quick. So once all the board members get back in the room, we'll begin your interview, okay?
Sounds good. Thank
thanks,
you.
thanks, Sarah.
You're welcome.
So I'm on a different machine, so I'm gonna hope that I don't screw anything up. Don't laugh.
Fingers crossed.
And as you might guess, it's not an apple. I've gone to enemy territory.
You get to relax after this presentation.
Yes, I get to see Merrick, my grandson. He has some yo-yo tricks,
Okay, good.
so.
You get to spend a lot of time with him. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm sure it's gonna be over soon. Okay, there we are.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm
Hello.
the Gresham-Barlow Board of Education. We just took a quick break and we're back now. We'll do a quick introduction of our folks and then we'll get into the part. Kathy Keithley will be running the conversation from the search committee, but I'm, as I said, Chris Howitt, the chair, and
I'm Kathy Keithley, Vice Chair.
Blake Peterson.
Myra Gomez.
Holly Riegelman.
David Ligatich.
John Barnes.
Great.
all right, so Kathy's gonna go ahead and lead us through.
Thank you.
Welcome.
First of all, both of you for jumping in a little bit early. It's so hard to figure out what the timing of all of this is. We're glad that our schedule changed a bit so that you could have a 10-minute overview of your firm. And then we have 7 questions actually that the board will ask after your introduction. So at your leisure, go ahead.
Okay, we will do that. We have a short PowerPoint as well, but good evening, board members. My name is Jada Rupley and representing Northwest Leadership Associates tonight are myself, Jada, and Dr. Dave Novotny. We understood that we have about 10 minutes for the presentation, so let's go ahead and get started and then we can get to the discussion and questions afterwards. What we quickly want to do. Okay, let me see here. Can you see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
The title
Okay,
slide.
my first success. We want you to get to know your Gresham-Barlow search team, and that is Dave and myself. So what we'd like to do is spend a brief amount of time going through these slides, letting you know a little bit about the process, how we customize that process to Gresham-Barlow School District, and then we can go into what actually the process will look like. With that, I'm going to go ahead and go to slide 2. And as you see, I've been in education for 35 plus years. My last position was superintendent at Clackamas ESD. When we lost Sarah to Gresham-Barlow, I was an associate superintendent in the Education 112 over in Washington, and my time in Oregon started with a governor appointment to by John Kitzhaber as his director of early learning. I've been a school psychologist, an elementary teacher, and a building administrator. So I'm going to move to Dave and let him tell you a little bit about himself.
So good evening, everyone. It's nice to be with you this evening. My name is Dave, and like Jada, I retired as a school superintendent here in Oregon. I have 38 years of experience in K-12 education and working at the ESD, 32 of those years in administration. I retired as superintendent of the Willamette ESD. I spent 11 years in that position. I also served as a deputy superintendent and superintendent of the Dallas School District. And I've been a principal, assistant principal, and high school teacher and coach. Also served as the president of the professional association for the ESDs. It's called the Oregon Association of ESDs, and served on a number of regional and statewide committees and task force. And we just share that information with you just to let you know that both Jada and I have extensive personal and professional networks that we can tap into during this search process. Jada, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, thanks, Dave. On our next slide, what I want to do is we have both chosen to be associates for Northwest Leadership, and it's a 24-year-old firm that's performed over 380 superintendent searches in Oregon, Washington, and the Pacific Northwest. That began in 2000 with Dennis Ray as the beginning. And so who many people may have known in Oregon for many of the searches was George Murdoch, who retired. And then George is now a county commissioner out in Pendleton, but he did many of the searches. Probably the last one that I know he did Multnomah ESD. We're a firm that we have positioned ourselves as a regional entity, but yet we have a very strong network of colleagues that include sitting superintendents, university professors, and associate executives all over the country. I am still in a women's leadership group that I work, that's a national group. And so what that affords both Dave and I, as well as our other associations, is that we have continuous contact with people in the field who really would like to come to Oregon. We provide school districts with strong pools of highly qualified candidates, and those candidates, what we find oftentimes are anywhere from 15 to 20 that you get down to that group that you can make a choice from. They're diverse in the fact that they are diverse in terms of candidates of color, as well as geographical diversity that we find that we have from all over the United States. Oregon's a very desirable place for people to come and work in education. We provide a search process that has a balance between connecting and engaging with your community, which we feel is a very important part of our process. And what you would learn from that is, if you've seen in our search phase 1 through 4, is we engage with staff, with administrators, with students, with parents and families, and your community members that you all help us choose for focus groups. And essentially, we ask the same questions that we are in the process of developing for you, a leadership profile of what people would like to see in the next superintendent of Gresham-Barlow. So I'm going to let Dave go on and talk a little bit more about the timeline and the process, and then we will wrap up here.
Thank you, Jada. So starting in September, so if the board makes a decision to allow Northwest Leadership Associates to support you with your superintendent search, as soon as you make the decision to hire us, we start working in support of your school district. The phase one activities that we refer to as the planning phase, preparing for the search and developing the leadership profile, begins immediately. And it involves a close association between Jada, myself, and members of the board. We need your assistance in co-developing the search plan and timeline. In our proposal on page 12 and 13, we have a tentative or a draft timeline for your consideration, but we know that's going to need to be modified in order to meet the needs of your school district. During this time period, it's important that we identify the key stakeholder groups that we need to interact with. And we know that Gresham-Barlow is a very diverse school district, diverse community, and so on. And we need your assistance in identifying those groups. We also need the support of the communications team in order to send out surveys, those type of things. And we would need the board's approval your approval of the search plan and timeline. You're ultimately in control of that timeline. As we move into October and November, this is the second phase of phase one activities. We would actually want to conduct interviews with each board member. It would be one-on-one interviews. We want to interact with your community. It's referred to as community engagement through focus groups, online surveys, could be larger meetings, some one-on-one conversations, those type of things. And what we are trying to do, as Jada already referenced, we're asking questions about four main areas. What are the challenges that Gresham-Barlow is experiencing? What are the opportunities? What are the hopes and aspirations that people have for the school system? We also want to know what are the professional qualifications people would like to see in your next superintendent, as well as the personal characteristics of your new superintendent. We take all that information and we put that into a leadership profile. We share all of the raw data with you as far as the survey results, the focus group results, and then Jada and I will try to give it some sort of structure. We'll try to categorize it, put it into themes, so it's a little bit easier for you to look at, understand what are the big issues facing your district, what are the big opportunities, and so on. As we go through that process, we'll start to focus on some preliminary recruitment, website development. I'm assuming you'll want to develop a landing page so people in your community can follow what the process is as far as selecting your next superintendent. And then we'll start to frame up the regional and national advertising. In November, things will get to be a little bit busier for the board. At the November board meeting, we're going to ask for the board to take a look at the focus group and survey results. We're going to ask for you to, in essence, later in that month, approve the leadership profile and brochure. And then once you approve that information, we can go ahead, post the position, and then actively start recruiting for the position. It's important for board members to understand that that leadership profile, it is what you're looking for in your next superintendent. So the information is extremely helpful. We want to make sure that the board approves that information. Let's move on to the next slide, if you don't mind. In this particular timeline scenario, we're recommending that we keep the position open through winter break and close it the first part of January. Our experience has dictated that a lot of potential candidates need winter break in order to complete that application to their satisfaction and get it submitted. So that would be one of our recommendations. We would like to close the application process sometime in early January. And then we would provide a screening report to the board. That would be a tiered ranking of all of the candidates, if that would be helpful to the board. Usually we can select 5 or 6 or sometimes even more individuals that have essentially met all the criteria that you're looking for. And we would say these would be your tier 1 candidates. Those who meet most, but maybe are missing a few, might be the tier 1A candidates, and so on, if that's helpful. And then we would need to work with the board to select the semifinalists. Usually that would be 5 to 6 candidates. It could be more, it could be less. But then what we would encourage the board to consider would be a day of interviews with those candidates, the preliminary candidates, and conduct 50-minute interviews with each of those individuals using the same set of questions with each of the candidates. At the end of that interview day, or maybe it's over 2 evenings, we would ask the board to come together and then identify 2 or 3 finalists that they would like to advance to finalist interviews. At that point in time, we would start to conduct third-party background checks on the finalists. And then as far as the finalist interviews are concerned, we would work closely with the board. Usually those finalist interviews are full day type affairs where the finalists are interacting with a number of your stakeholder groups. That might include employees, union leadership, either your administrative team or cabinet. It could be community groups and so on. And we would need your help in structuring what that day looks like. And then it culminates in interviews with the board in executive session that particular evening. And then depending on how many candidates you bring back for final interviews, it might be over 1 or 2 days. It just depends, once again, on how many people you bring for final interviews. After those interviews, we would encourage board action on the finalists to select that finalist. And then we would be entering into contract negotiation phase, making that announcement to your public, and then eventually taking board action on the contract for the new superintendent. This is an aggressive timeline, and we understand that the board might want to lengthen it out and maybe conclude in February, depends on what your needs are. But there would be a lot of opportunity for transition activities between the new superintendent and whoever the interim superintendent is for the remainder of the year. And then, of course, the new superintendent would start on July 1, it's our understanding. Jada, I'll kick it back over to you.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing and then we can be ready for the questions and conversation with board.
Great. I'll start out with the first question. How do you define the criteria for the ideal superintendent and how will you customize it for our district's needs?
So when the ideal superintendent, what we do is what we like to look at is a list of those qualifications that come from you as board members, from your administrative staff and cabinet, from students and from the community. And what we do is we put those together. We look to see what qualities come up most and what actually come up least. Sometimes doctorates are important for districts. Sometimes those are not. There are many different things. So we basically hope to facilitate that conversation to come up with. What you will be surprised, and we've heard this many times in the districts that we've been in, is that the document that we give you will give you information not only to use as you look at that ideal candidate that fits for Gresham-Barlow at this time, but also it's a roadmap for looking at future strategic planning as well as your new superintendent when they come in terms of things that you found during this search.
Great, thank you.
I get the second question. How will you assess both professional qualifications and cultural fit within our district?
Hey, do you want to go ahead and start on that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So professional qualifications are generally the easiest area for us to assess. Across the state, you'll see similar professional qualifications for superintendents. For example, in the state of Washington, when we do searches up there, they don't necessarily have a licensure requirement like we have in Oregon. So the candidate needs to have a TSPC license in order to work as a superintendent. That, once again, is usually the smallest section of the feedback that we get from our focus groups and the easiest one for us to assess. I would say as a general rule, for such a large school district as Gresham-Barlow, we would probably be looking for a sitting superintendent, has experience that would like to move. So I think that is going to be one of the big issues that we would be looking for, someone with experience so that they can hit the ground running. Jada?
I was just gonna say, as far as the cultural fit, I think that what we find is as the process moves on, those things come out. In our focus groups, in our meetings and work with you as a board and a search committee, and who we would then recruit for candidates to come into this pool.
If I can piggyback on that, Jada, once we see what the needs of the community really are when it comes to diversity, cultural understanding, and so on, then there's an opportunity for Jada and I and other associates for Northwest Leadership Associates to identify people, and we'll actually reach out and connect with those people and ask them if they might be interested in considering applying for the position.
If you're done answering that question, I can go on to number 3. Can you share an example of a challenging superintendent search you have conducted and how you overcame the difficulties?
Jada, I'll let you handle that one.
Can you repeat the question? I didn't hear all of it.
Can you share an example of a challenging superintendent search that you have conducted and how have you overcome those difficulties?
So a challenging superintendent search is one that a board may not have similar priorities and qualifications in mind. And so what we do at that point is what we try to do is provide guidance to a board. So that may end up being a workshop to be able to hammer out and work through the ideas of what are going to be most important for all. And you want to make everyone happy to find who their next leader is going to be. But I know that ultimately the majority of the vote is who puts your superintendent in place. What we would hope is a unanimous vote is important to superintendent candidates too as they come in. I think also I can give you a scenario where for us is the search went on longer than what we expected, and the candidate pools get very competitive with other districts, which is why we're suggesting that you want to be in the first round to be able to do that, so that Gresham-Barlow is out there first to be able to have the pick of those candidates who you would consider probably most appropriate for your district. Did we get to what you needed there?
Just clarification, when you said that the challenge is when the board has different qualifications in mind, do you mean different qualifications than what has come up from the community's input? Or different from whom?
I would just say no, once we get into the job announcement and the position profile, you don't want to go too far from that, but there will be several of them there and people will always pick what's most important to them. So what we have to do is meld those.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I'm on the next question. Number 4, how will you keep the board and other stakeholders informed throughout the search process?
We do that by a number of ways. We have communications. What we'd like to do is whoever is the chair of your search committee, that would be the main person that we connect with by email, by phone call, by meetings. We also are happy to come to board work sessions, and then usually there is a person, and that's usually your executive assistant or your board secretary, who helps with much of the organization of those meetings, because we would not know who to contact for some of the focus groups and things like that. So we depend heavily upon your designee to be able to help us to get the right people to the table. If there is a preferred method that comes up from your search committee and from your board, we're happy to accommodate that as well. Dave and I are very hands-on, and we like very much to build a relationship with you all as we go through this process.
Could you provide details about your proposal costs? For example, what is in the base rate? What are the additional add-on services? And what do we need to know about the add-on services and why we would need them?
Dave, do you want to start on that one? And then we can kind of go in terms of the base rate. So what if, and maybe I'll start, Dave. I'm fine with that. So our proposal is 20,500. And that basically would be the cost of what you would have for us. The only thing that would be additional would be mileage that we would look at 2 meetings. And I can already tell you that neither one of us are very good to put that in there. So oftentimes you won't see that as well. Should you want additional focus groups, other than the 2 to 3 days that we allow within the proposal, we would talk to you about what that would look like for another day's time to do that. But whatever you have seen in the proposal pretty much is what we consider inclusive.
Just as a follow-up, can you give us an amount for an additional focus group?
Hold on a minute. One more time.
Just for reference, can you give us a cost estimate for an additional focus group if we chose to do that?
I think we'd have to look at that and see. It may be able to be that we can work within there, but if it isn't, it's basically probably a day's time, and it could probably be $500 more.
One other follow-up to that is that if there's a out-of-state candidate, we'd be responsible for travel costs for them, wouldn't we?
That's correct.
Okay.
Which also is maybe how you would decide to do things virtually, that you may do that original interview with them by Zoom rather than bring them out until you're sure that that is a candidate that you want to see more of it in your community to see more of as well.
All right, I've got a fun one. What sets your firm apart from others in terms of securing the best candidate for a superintendent?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say I think you would enjoy very much to work with Dave and I. We're both extremely nice people. We feel like we're very competent and that we develop a strong relationship with you as a board, as well as your community and all of your staff. I think the other thing is there's deep experience that goes into this process, and we've watched it work over and over again in many districts. So we feel very confident in being able to take a process that works very well. Our sitting superintendents, many of them are 5 to 7 years. So we talk to them when we recruit. And what we hope to is to make sure that they come for a good period of time to be able to be a strong leader with the needs in the community in Gresham-Barlow. Dave, do you want to?
Yeah, and Jod, if I may, one of the things that really excited me about the prospect of working for Northwest Leadership Associates was it is a group of 14 individuals. And even though this proposal talks about interacting with both Jada and myself during the search process, we have the ability and we will reach out to the other associates to use their personal and professional networks as well. And I've seen that work time and time again, where these experienced individuals can recommend really outstanding candidates to apply for positions. So I've been really impressed with that aspect of the organization.
And oftentimes they will have seen them interview as well. So we have a little bit of insight into how they will do within your community and your interview process.
I have just a very short one. If someone was to ask you, they want to know Gresham, Oregon, what would you tell them? 3 to 5 words. What would you say about Gresham in our area? Why would they come here?
Do you
Or
want to
what
start?
do they know about Gresham?
Yeah, I'll start. Great community, solid school district, a diverse student population and community. And I think that's going to attract a number of people. Your city is, I can't remember, it's like the 4th largest in the state, 100,000. I mean, it is a large school district, and there are going to be a lot of individuals interested in coming to Gresham-Barlow because of the community, because of the students. I think it's a wonderful place for people to work.
I'd just like to add to that, I echo the fact that you have quality education in the district of Gresham-Barlow. And also Dave and I, having spent time in Oregon for several years, have seen an incredible leadership that you have had over time that have been strong leaders. They not only give of their time to the district, but they are involved statewide, as I know that you as board members are as well.
And I think, Jada, the other thing I can add is sharing personal experiences. When I was superintendent of the Willamette ESD, we actually looked to the Gresham-Barlow School District as an exemplar. We wanted to build a regional CTE facility to support a number of school districts in our ESD region. And so we identified the Center for Advanced Learning as an exemplar, went and visited that with a large group of people, and we were truly impressed with the quality of education, that model, and the people there were so generous with their time and resources. And what we built in the mid-Willamette Valley really reflects a lot of the work that you've done in Gresham-Barlow with that particular program. So we can also share personal experiences as well.
Okay, we took more than the 5 stuff, but I think those are all pretty relevant in terms of what we think for Gresham-Barlow.
I'm gonna ask a follow-up question because it's the same question I've been asking tonight. Your proposal mentions that you have a diverse group of individuals. And you mentioned that your meetings would be conducted in Spanish and English when you do focus groups or individual interviews or meetings here in our district. What is your capacity to include other multilingual speakers in a district that has over 100 languages represented?
We do know that you have a very diverse school district and many languages are spoken in there. We do not have the capacity other than we have our survey done in Spanish and English, and that would go up right away to do that. And then as requested, we would have someone do that, but we would have to turn back to you as a district for your resources to be able to figure out how to do that.
Thank you.
I noticed on the resumes that, Dave, you started in 2024 and Jada, I can't remember just a couple of years ago. Have you guys had experience leading superintendent searches? And if so, can you talk a little bit about those?
Yeah, you want me to start, Jada?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm the newest member to the Northwest Leadership Associates, and want to be candid and upfront about that. I've conducted 2 superintendent searches, both with Jada. Both were successful. But also in my role as an ESD superintendent, I've worked as an interim superintendent for 2 of our districts. One of them was Jefferson School District, and one was the Newburgh School District after a big public blow up in that particular community. And sometimes ESD superintendents need to step in and serve for a period of time. And in both of those cases, I, in essence, ran the superintendent search for both of those school districts with some additional support, of course. And then after I retired, I also served for a brief period of time in an emergency situation as acting superintendent of Coos Bay. and helped significantly with their superintendent search as well. So I have a total of 5 searches.
I have done 6 different searches in the time that I've been with Northwest Leadership Associates, as well as Point North, my consulting firm. And also, as Dave mentioned, when you're an ESD superintendent, one of the things that you often find that you're able to do is assist a district in some really tough times that they have within a transition of a superintendent leaving, or situations like that. So I also was able to help with Colton as they were doing a transition within theirs, and the other districts are listed in our timeline there in terms of Ridgefield School District, Woodland School District, Castle Rock, Gladstone in Oregon, and then also Charter Academy as well.
Great, thank you.
You bet.
Any other follow-up questions? So with that, if you just want to give us your closing remarks, that would be great.
We just, I see your superintendent sitting back there too. Hi, James, how are you? We'd just like you to know that we would like very much to be able to work with you as a search team and a board. I have the greatest respect for the work that you've done as a board. This is a big challenge that you all are faced to be able to do as James rides off into the sunset, happily ever after. The next thing is you have to think about the challenges. I think you're well positioned to be able to find your next leader, and that's what's exciting, is to let us be that connecting factor to recruit good candidates and bring them to you for your choice.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so that wraps it up.
Thank you, and thank you for your patience with my, I had to go over to my daughter's house and use her equipment, and so it's all new and I'm just like panicking, so now I can relax. So, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so
Nice to
much.
meet you.
Okay, do we want to take another, we only take that, right? That was it. Do we want to take another good short walk around, or are we ready to just keep going?
We can just open our door for it.
Either one, that.
Yeah.
Because we're so.
What's the trying to apply?
Yeah. So, yes, it does. So trying to figure out the next, because I feel like a little bit, I just want to make sure you got their questions out, everyone has had their chance to look at the information. We do have on here that we were gonna do the deliberation selection tonight. I think originally one of the documents, so do that at a later date, but I don't think that's scheduled, so it's on here for us to do it.
I don't think it was ever put
It
on
was maybe a
something else.
tentative something.
Probably just
Okay.
because we weren't sure, and I think the point was that we can, everything is based on the board's comfort level. If questions are answered, and you feel confident moving forward, we can tonight. Oh, if though, that's one possibility, but if we did, then we would have to convene in a board meeting. I guess we don't, we could do it tonight. But if there was another time or something else that you wanted that we needed to gather, whether that was questions or see leadership reports, I did forget to ask them how in-depth their leadership report was, but if you wanted to see samples of those or reference checks, but if we are at some point going to either gather information and then make a decision, I would rather not wait until October 2nd to do that, because we have, another 2 weeks between now and then, that they could, whoever we pick could begin at least gathering the information. So that's just a consideration, but it's really up to the board.
And I would say as well, unless you do have some questions or real concerns or want more information, then I think that we can at least have a conversation tonight and see if anything comes up.
Right.
That reveals itself as, wait, I can't make a decision tonight, as opposed to, I do have all the information, so.
I think we should discuss. So I think we all have different views on this and have questions. People have questions. In my mind, I see a clear difference. I think there's one firm that can work nationally and locally. It is some of the best candidates, whether those candidates are here in Oregon or not. I know where my mind is, but I'd like to hear everybody else.
So is that one of the questions that you had as a search group, and we didn't discuss it fully as the full board, but is a national search as important? We've done both over the years. We've done national searches and we've done more Pacific Northwest region searches, pros and cons in that. They already know the area usually, or there's also other additional costs. If we take someone national, we're paying for them to come here.
I think I'm talking just between these two specific search firms. As my mind works, I don't even take notes. As my mind works, I say, here's this perspective, here's this perspective. I've made up my mind. But I'd like to be able to open my mind a little bit and hear what people say. Because my mind is already chosen. Let's see what everybody.
So maybe we can all go around, or you wanna,
Sure,
like,
yeah.
I think what stood out to me was this is not gonna be very decisive. Two things that I heard them say were common that I think will have a lot of significance, and that is what expectations there are on the board. So to me, their processes around that sort of are moot, because both talked about who we engage in our focus groups. The board and the district will guide them to that. And I think that's critical because I was sitting here in the midst of the second interview going like, who do I want them to talk to? Who do I need them to talk to for me to have confidence in their selection? You know, and or their polling of the. So that was true of both of them. Both of them answered that way. Both of them talked about needing our support and engagement, specifically translation services. So I think on both fronts, both expressed a willingness and even a necessity to work. So I sort of, that became moot. What stood out right away in that first one was, to Chris's point, we kind of camped on the fence. What would the community say about whether we go national, regional, state, local? And I'm still sitting on that fence. Like, and I think that's the place that the board has to get off. It feels like either firm, we're needing to define the interview process. And
when I look at it, I see one firm and the second firm. And we're gonna get two completely different
candidate pools.
What's that?
Candidate pools.
Yes. And I'm not trying to sway anybody at all. But the board portal is phenomenal. One is gonna lean more on the board, way more on the board in my mind than the other. I think you get what you pay for. But keep going, please.
Sean or Holly?
I did like the board portal. There's pros and cons to both for sure. I think prior to hearing from them, I would say I leaned more towards a more local company. But I appreciated the experience of the first group. How many searches they've done, it's a lot more in the second group. And I really did like the board portal and having that open to us all the time. Because I think we are really busy, and I know for me personally, having access to that throughout the process, I'm gonna be more confident in the candidates we have, because I'm not relying on a 2-hour meeting to try to take in all the information, or us trying to get together for 1 2-hour meeting where all of our times align. I don't think that's necessarily total deal breaker. I just hadn't thought about that, so that was impressive to me. I don't like that either of them don't have capacity for language interpreters. I think it's on us. And maybe rightly so, because we know our community better than either of them do, and so we know how to communicate with those stakeholders, and so maybe that's preferred anyways, that we reach out the way that we know our communities.
Well, and that's a really good
Respond.
point. When we say we have 167 languages,
112.
112.
They said 160.
Oh, somebody.
Yeah.
did.
From a different.
Okay, well, let me just add a few just to keep that spicy. If we have whatever the number is that we have things in place to make sure we communicate with all of those different groups. So it does kind of make sense that they would use our conduit to do that rather than to create their own when they aren't from here. I mean, we do have the capacity. And just like I asked them, if depending on what that cost would be, we have to include it. But it sounds like we're gonna include that either way, whether they pay it or we pay it. Seems like it's simple.
So one other thing that I forgot to mention is I did like how the first group talked a lot about student voice. And how that was a really big priority for them, and that they were gonna listen to student voice. I don't remember hearing the second group say that. I know they said focus groups and community groups and stakeholders, but didn't specifically call out students, and so I did appreciate
I
that.
have that they did when they responded to question 1.
Okay.
Yeah,
And then they said they would talk to whoever we told them.
Mhm. That we would.
I like how they brought up the freshman's quote that the new superintendent has to like good music.
Oh, that was good.
Yes,
But that was that kid who said it, not them.
no, but I like how they brought it.
That's not a quality to them.
Um. You know, I think, going into it, you know, I'm gonna be like, oh, we just need. However, honestly, the experience, of the first group, I guess, openness where we're able to see everything and, you know, have access to it is really cool. I think their answers were a lot more robust. So like when I do a lot of interviews, you know, short answers that, you know, kind of to me isn't the best, and where they provided, you know, very robust answers to the first group. I think that they had a good plan. I like that their survey is done in many languages, whereas in the other group, it seems like their survey is Spanish and English only, and if we wanted it in another language, we could pay for that to be interpreted into another language, whereas it's probably a robust survey in the first one. Multiple, many different things.
That was an Adam.
That was an app, but yeah. You know, I think that, the first one is certainly qualified to do it. local. But then if we want to do national, they have contacts national as well. And maybe there is somebody who is currently living in Texas, but grew up in Gresham, Oregon, would be willing to move out here again, you know? And are we limiting ourselves by just opening it up to the more? Anyway, so for me, it was pretty clear in my decision, like which group I would like to move forward with. And it's not necessarily the group I was going into.
So, I I had the benefit of being on the committee and reviewing in detail all 5 proposals. And I actually spent an enormous amount of time researching every single thing they put in here. For instance, in the, which of the top school districts, what the size was. What their pool was, and I went online to look at when they did the search and who they hired. And it was interesting that in many of them, they did a national search and hired someone from within the state. So I don't think necessarily that saying going national or regionally is, you should broaden it, because to Sean's point, you could get someone back. And the cost differential isn't that different.
I think the vetting process is really different.
What's that?
I think the vetting process is different.
The vetting processes were, for sure. But I guess what struck me is that, and again, this is a lot of talking to the different people, is that it's interesting that the first one said 75% of their superintendent searchers are not from postings. It's from reaching the candidates that they believe have the best fit for what we need based on our stakeholders. We are diverse. We need that lens. We are, urban and rural. We have a very unique difference within our community. I want that represented. I guess, and again, going to a national firm does not preclude recruitment in Oregon, and staying in an Oregon firm may not preclude a national. I have to look at the experience. And with, Dave and Jada, they are brand new and they have experience as education service districts superintendents, but not necessarily the relationship with the applicants. I just want someone, and I think to the point about the first firm talking about the students, it's I know that in the proposal for Northwest Leadership, they did talk about the leadership profile as a brochure, as opposed to a 30-page report. That the more data you have, and again, I just have to go with the experience, the summarization of all of the stakeholders' meetings and focus groups. They've done it so much, particularly with the focus on students, that they've done it so much. It is so important to them that they know what to say to get the students to talk. They know what they also, their experience, just the depth and breadth of it, means that what they get in terms of stakeholder input, they have successfully, with the number of superintendents still there, have figured out how to translate that into what qualifications are for a superintendent.
I think the processes
They what now?
I think the processes that they have available to them, due to the fact that they have that experience, brings a candidate, whether it's local or national. But I didn't hear from like Myra or.
I was waiting for Kathy last week.
I'd like to hear from Myra and Chris, because we all have way different points of view.
So to me, I mean, that my top firm was not chosen, and not one of the 2 that we interviewed. So for me, it's choosing the least bad of the 2.
At least what?
The least bad of the 2.
Okay.
I think the first one is still maintaining the status quo. They have a lot of experience, just hiring the same type of superintendent that they described, looking at the districts that they listed. They weren't even, their language is so antiquated, which is one of the reasons I eliminated one of the first ones when we did talk on Friday. It just seems like same old to me. Yeah, they have cool tools, they have cool toys that we want to play with. Because the portal does sound attractive to me, but they didn't know much about even Gresham. At least the second ones, they at least knew how big our district or city is. They knew that we were the 4th largest city. They know our state. So And like Kathy said, I don't think it eliminates them from doing a national search, at least when they are looking nationally, they'll be able to speak to our state and to our city. Versus the first ones, yeah, they can do a national search, but they don't know what they're looking for. They don't know who we are, they don't know what it's like to be here. These are second people did, they lived here. Jana was very Clackamas, she said, and the other guy were 11, so at least they know our education system. And they never called us minorities, so that was nice, because in our district, our students of color are the majority, so I just didn't see the first group represented. And even if we're just talking about rural and urban, I didn't even see them being able to do that. They would be able to represent our. So that's just me, that's my opinion, and I think right now I'm speaking for 50% of our students.
So I had some of the same kind of, just thoughts in it. I wasn't really that impressed with the idea of a portal. To me, that feels a little bit, distant. I want communication from whoever it is that we're paying. I worry a little bit about a portal having stuff that you could look at. But how are we interpreting that? What is it that we're seeing? How are we actually engaging with that? It just felt like I mean, I like portals, I like online stuff, but I also like being able to call somebody on the phone and say, how are we doing? What's going on? Give me a weekly update, as opposed to relying on us to go in and look at the portal. That was a make or break.
And even we've seen that surveys haven't worked with our communities well,
Yeah.
we would still have to do listening sessions. So
Right.
either one, we're still having to use our own resources.
Right.
We're still gonna have to use our family liaisons for that.
Yeah, and thank you, Kathy, for letting me add the mystery seventh question, and then I realized I have to ask the same question of both of them now. I can't change the question, but on the one group, they gave us what was off our website. It wasn't really personal, it was just an answer. And the other one, she had exact things, they had exact things that they were talking about, brought up Cal, CTE, brought up the size of our city, brought up the diverse student population. So there's a little bit more awareness of our school district. And I recognize, to David's point, that, or Sean's, whoever said it, that, a national search may find someone who's been in the area and wants to come back. I believe that if they are out of the area and they want to come back, they already know that we're searching for something. They don't need a firm to tell them. They're paying attention. If they want to move back to Oregon or Washington or whatever, they're paying attention for when there are openings. The people that are available, my view is that they're not sitting around waiting for a search firm to call them. They are keeping an eye on a variety of pieces of information. Full disclosure, the group that I was interested in didn't make the cut as well. So I was a little bit disappointed in that. So of the two, I felt a little bit more comfort with the conversation with Northwest leadership. I appreciated as well that they may not have done as many searches, but they have been involved in helping school districts that have had some pretty serious challenges and been able to work with that, so they understand the highs and the lows of working with the school district to find a superintendent. And I think they would work closely with us. I do appreciate that they know where Gresham is. They could find us on a map, and I'm not sure on the other group if they really knew. And more, I don't know that we need 50 people to apply, kind of thing. That we don't need a bunch, we just need the best. But I just felt I was more comfortable with Northwest leadership.
I just want to say thanks. I value everybody's opinion. Trying to look at things in a different light. It's quick to judge. We're all going to vote the way that we feel best. But I appreciate you guys and your opinions.
Well, and to that point, the good news is that the process is so similar. I mean, getting stakeholder focus, getting board involvement, the costs are the same. And maybe it's just their lack of experience, having not their proposal not be as complete in terms of not thinking about the travel. If we did, I mean, so, but I don't know that we could go wrong either way, it's just,
Well, I would at least want to choose the one that is Oregon. I mean,
How do we?
and at some point, I want the best candidate. And I still, all of the things, I will land on, the ability for them to, and their success of finding the person that matches what what our stakeholders ultimately say is more important.
So I also would like to just mention both of the groups were rather cavalier about, we would just add some things to our website and we would just update and we would put some things on our website. That's a little cavalier for them to come in and say that someone on our district will change and put stuff out there. That's a cost. That is a cost. And likewise, usually I do not ask questions of our board secretary. However, they were looking to have the board secretary involved in some of the scheduling and communication work. Is that a usual thing or is that something that would impact
Every
I
proposal.
think that,
Okay.
if my understanding just it was on, that was a very.
Okay, because I didn't hear it in the first one specifically, but I didn't go through as kind of review it, but they all said point person.
Oh, one group called it out.
Okay, got it.
But all five.
Okay.
It was universal.
Okay,
Cause that's just the nature, I mean, I would have to work with you guys on scheduling.
right,
And
right.
I think for me,
Okay,
it-
thank you.
like the first group did say that they would give us a weekly update. And I agree, they didn't know as much about Oregon, but I guess I can't fault them for that when we haven't yet hired them. And because their focus was students, I feel like what we need in our district is gonna come out through our students. That's what I love most about the first group, is that was their main focus. And so we talk about student voice, and I think because that's their focus, they're gonna get what they need from our community, because our community is it's our kids, it's our students, and they know what's happening in our schools. And so I guess because of their experience, it feels easier for me to trust the process with the focus on the students. The second group, to me, seemed like, well, we've been here, we know the things. That seemed more of the same to me.
For clarification of the process. I don't think that I've been here for two things. So are we talking each other into voting for one, or are we voting each one individually?
I think we're voting for one. We're choosing one, I believe, is what the most recommended.
but he's asking if each of us is going to vote, right? You're asking if each of us is going to vote.
No,
for
My question is in respect to everybody in here, are we gonna take a vote on leadership and take a vote on HYA? Or are we saying,
No, the motion reads as move to select one of these firms to assist the Gresham-Barlow School Board in recruitment and selection process for a new superintendent.
And the
So
reason
we
that
just do
would
one.
work, David, so just so I can clarify, if you made a motion and say you voted on the one and that one had the majority, then that would be the action that you would have to take. Because you couldn't then vote on the other one because you've already had the majority of that action.
so if someone says, I move to with this, and then they vote no, then do we move on to the second?
Yeah, if that motion fails, if you had a 4-3 in the negative, then you would have to make another motion to the other firm or trying to change somebody's mind or something, so.
Sure.
But it could also be, I mean, it's also that we just put our mark in the sand, go for one, and if it fails, then we still have the option of doing a second motion. So either way, it kind of works.
Okay.
But I think as it's written, the expectation was that we would at least start with voting for who we wanted to have, who was our first choice.
I have a question. Was anybody here involved in staff engagement for the previous national search? I know that you staff,
No staff.
no
I
staff.
don't think so.
No staff.
No,
Okay, so that process is to what was proposed to us.
Mhm.
Were students engaged for that search?
I believe so. I'm trying to remember, because I thought, actually, no.
Students were not involved.
Oh, no, but Superintendent Hugh, I believe when we did our last national search, there were staff focus groups. Our last national search, before.
It was a-
Yeah,
It
there's
was the,
trees.
whatever.
Trees and
the-
trees.
I'm probably gonna know.
Yeah,
And I'm trees was all.
District staff.
Yeah, the same firm. They
One
were-
of them.
they were-
yeah, and I thought also they met with union leadership as well. And they met with some other key, because there were a lot more stakeholders.
I was not aware.
Yeah,
I wasn't involved in that part.
I think they did meet with union leadership because there was some engagement with staff, not maybe as much as these groups are talking about. And the only way that we had student engagement was when we did the hiring for Superintendent Hugh. And that was through the Let's Ask, and we got a lot of student feedback. We had a lot of student feedback on that, but it was not, we didn't do as many in person on that. We did most of that virtually. So, but I just remember because we had several candidates, it got down to the final group. And I just remember those candidates coming and making visits around the district and talking to folks with the consultants.
I knew the firm that the board used in 2016 for Catrice was Ray and Associates from
Yeah.
Iowa.
That sounds familiar.
Right.
Yeah,
What was the best part of that process according to you, and what was the worst part of that, least effective part?
actually, the best part of the process was their trademark way that they have the board go through the finalists and determine who they want and who they don't want. They had a way of factoring that in, that was quite interesting. I used that same process when we did the Oregon School Board Association search as well. It brings out what the concerns are. And just as clarification, we deliberately said that we wanted to have an outside search. We deliberately wanted to spread the net very wide. The district needed some different viewpoints, and we wanted to bring in different voice. And so we were able to accomplish some things, work with a graduate, do some other work along that lines. And so, but it was also a hardship for someone to come from outside the area. Oregon is a little bit different.
Hard, yeah, I think incredible. I would call that higher success, but it didn't come without difficulty. I have external to any kind of motion. The first firm, should that be where the board goes? One concern would be they have a 75% recruitment. All their placements 75% recruited by them. And it looks like their track record is really strong. I don't have a presentation for executive searches. But I will say that sometimes recruited executives do lack a fit. You know, it's their person. So here's a square peg, and we're gonna put it in that hole because that's our person. We've recruited them. I feel like there's better controls in this environment than the one that I'm referencing or experiences that I've had. But that's one kind of pause for me. And they had, in 5 years, they've had, no, 4 years, they've had one placement in Oregon. To their credit, that person is still in that position. No, but
It was a question that was specifically asked in the RFP, and seemed like somewhere they said the number was 5.
There were tensions.
So, you know, and you can see that either way, but at least with that concern, there was a pretty good tension
The first one or the second?
first.
So something else, that as we move into this next, as we move into the superintendent part, previously, the focus groups that we used were basically determined by the, superintendent's key communicator groups. And I think probably when we look at that, that was a good place to get in and meet with various stakeholders. But I think we do have an opportunity to expand that. It's a good starting place. But as some of the conversations come up from our board members, how we want to make sure that we're hearing more voices. And does the key communicators have a student group? Superintendent meets with students, student group.
District equity advisors.
Through that, yeah, so through that, but previously was the superintendent meeting with students.
Dr. Pereira actually, through her superintendency, and this was kind of part of COVID, we're having, meetings with student representatives from our 3 high schools.
Okay.
Like it wasn't necessarily face to face until after during the pandemic. There were face to face meetings that, virtual meetings that were facilitated by district staff. Participated, some of us on the cabinet were involved in those. But that kind of more, again, she was hired and the need to get more student voices around it.
Some middle school. One of my
I
kids
think
did,
eventually they got to a couple of.
maybe even grade school.
Yeah.
There was, I think she had initially started before COVID hit. She went and did a round at like all of the like.
Yeah,
middle
because one of
school.
my kids participated in one of those, and that would have been.
There, it was a big like, they would order pizza and everybody get together and she would be able to talk with the students.
Yeah.
So. Sean, you're kind of quiet down
I just taking it all in, you know. No, I think, I'm just really trying to process everybody's points and then go along with what I'm seeing and, you know, I think looking at the list of districts that Northwest looked at, the similar sized wasn't many districts of similar size, whereas HYA, they have obviously other districts, a lot of them do were within the range of our. So I guess I'm still, even after listening to process, in favor of HYA person.
I was gonna add as a point, because you just prompted that, when we talk about this status quo. For me, it was a negative, but in the second interview, when one of the consultants said, you know, really, you're gonna be looking for a sitting superintendent with experience. To me, that's premature. And we're looking for an educational leader who's qualified and passionate and able to raise the votes for all of our kids. And if that's a traditional climb the ladder candidate, then great. If that's an innovative candidate that comes from a less traditional background or process, and I think that's our person. I want to make sure that whoever we hire casts that net sufficiently to capture that person. And then I think that I think it's critical and incumbent on the whole board, not just the search committee, to do that personal reflection. To make sure that when they come and sit at the table with us, we're telling them who they need to talk to and what exactly we're looking for our kids. I'm the one who I think logged that, you know, maybe they can help define our process. I think that's who I always, we just, we have to define it for them. We have to point them in the way. And I hear Myra's concerns and as far as it's in my capacity to understand them, I share them. You know, I know I don't understand them fully, but, yeah,
I've been in this community 23 years. I was a store manager at Safeway in Sandy, and I was driving home on Highway 26, and there was a car wreck, and it was like, and I saw these new homes being built. My wife, we need to move. You're down where I grew up. But when I saw the country out here and I saw these beautiful homes, my first thing she said was, how are the schools? She researched schools. We were the schools of choice. That's why we moved them. Living here 23 years in this diverse community, and when I say diverse, I mean culturally diverse. I mean diverse in an aspect where we have that side is all country, this side is all city. The best thing that could ever happen in a school district in this search is that we have somebody that knows Gresham. In my mind, breathes and loves Gresham and the diversity that it brings, because if we don't have that person, in my mind, it's not going to be successful. Which firm do I think can better? Which firm do I think has the best ability to do that? In my head, after listening to everybody and with everybody, we're not going to all agree on this one. I think I know which way I pick. It's like a cooking show.
And also, it doesn't matter because it's not our super, for me, I'm not gonna die on this way. Like, it doesn't matter if we go with the first one over the second, because that's not. That's amazing. And I think it's also very important. It's not the superintendent. We're choosing a firm, not the firm.
Right,
We're not choosing. So, yeah, exactly. But also, when we are choosing a superintendent, let's keep in mind, we don't all have the privilege to choose where we live. We don't know, we know where the best schools are, but we know where we can afford to. Right, so, and those are the families that I'm here to represent, right? Because not everyone gets to choose where to live. Then not everyone gets to research and go where the best. So those are the best schools. So we're trying to provide, I'm trying to provide schools kids who don't get to choose where they live or whose families don't get to.
That's our task, that we have a district, that everybody who lives within our boundaries is provided the best school. That's our job. If we're successful, then we've provided everybody, despite socioeconomic status.
Yeah,
or
and
whatever.
and also without the lived experience, we don't always get to give that because we haven't lived it. So, and it's also really important to keep that in mind when we're asking for this. We're asking to include student voice because we don't always. I have experience, but I don't. So even then, it's like, who are we leaving out when we're asking for this focus? Who are we leaving out when we say digital survey will be enough to capture this? Those are the when we choose a firm, are they going to think of this? And are we going to?
So are we at a point where someone would like to make a motion? We've discussed it quite a bit, probably some that we've discussed that should be within a motion to discuss. We need to kind of see where we were as we moved into this, but at this point, I feel like further discussion would be around the motion. So
I guess at risk of,
you'll either make it or be shot down.
yeah, I mean, honestly, it doesn't matter, but, I guess
It's just moved to select the whichever one, just this Gresham-Barlow School Board, the selection process for new superintendent.
I moved to select HYA to assist the Gresham-Barlow School Board with the selection process for the city. And I will be on.
Okay, so it's been moved by Sean, is there a second?
Second for discussion.
Okay. So is there any further discussion to the motion? Motion is to select, we should use their.
Hazard Young.
Hazard Young and Tia, also known as HYA, to assist, which is an important word, the Gresham-Barlow School Board in the recruitment and selection process for a new superintendent. So any discussion about that particular motion? Without going into details of changing their proposal, but is that the firm that we want to go to assist us in finding a superintendent? Colin, David, you're shaking your head. Okay. No comments?
Still
Colin?
reading my, no.
Okay, all right, Myra? Comments about it? Okay. All right, Blake? Okay, Kathy? All right, myself? No. So with that, if there being no further comments, then, I'm gonna do a roll call. Rather than just voice, so I hear everyone. So I will start at this end of the table. I would vote yes, HY. Kathy?
Yes.
Blaze?
Yes.
All right, Myra?
No.
Holly?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Sean?
Yeah.
Okay, so motion passes 6-1. And so at that point, David, to your earlier thing, we don't do a second motion because we do have one in place. I think some of the concerns that we had with HYA, we will address when we get into a final contract with them. We do not have a final contract. We have the concept of the contract. And so we will work with them on that, and some of the concerns that have been brought up in our conversation need to be a part. So. Okay, anything else, Karen?
Well, just with that, there's so much swimming in my brain about interim and superintendent, but is there a direction to, we have to approve the contract before they begin work? Or the next step in the process is, to develop that contract, which we do with. And, yeah. So do you want me to contact them? And I mean, I am talking to the other firms that have asked for feedback about the process of them not being interviewed, so I'm gonna do that. But so do we provide them a contract, or do they, one of the firms had included it. If it was Northwest or not, but so do we give them one or have them prepare it to us and then get to the attorney?
I think they would have a.
So they give it to us.
Yeah.
So I'll get that.
Yeah.
And then we'll, do addendums for what we wanna make sure that we incorporate. And then it'll come back to the board. Maybe that we work with Elliot to get it to us on the second then.
I would rather have it done right than to rush it, so if you
Yeah.
can get it back to us by then, but we want to make sure that we have the concerns that have been addressed would be put into the contract. And some of those were around the focus groups and some of that conversation with that, and make sure that we understand, particularly as they prep forward a contract, what all add-ons and how many of those are we gonna pick, because I don't want to have a surprise later that.
Well, it would, we literally have to intentionally select them, so it's not be part of the discussion.
Right.
So laying out the timeline that they had included in their proposal, so early October, they would meet with us to plan the search, determine the process, finalize timeline. Is that a board-wide conversation or just with the search committee?
I think at that point, we're gonna.
Okay, so that's full board, early October, so that would be like. And
Yeah,
then,
that would be a work session.
and then by mid-October, they will have individual interviews with us.
If I could, the questions at hand are getting something from them, getting that to Elliot for review, how long it might take Elliot to review. And then, you just said something else. So I would think that would take a bit of time, but if by chance it happens earlier, is there any reason? And then to talk to HYA about the time frame of getting the contract to the second and how that changes this, is that important for anybody to know? Or not?
Say it again.
If we don't approve the contract until the second, how does that change this, or is it substantive to changing that they would want to make it sooner? I don't know.
I wonder.
I'm tired. I don't know what questions you want.
Could we tentatively schedule HYA for that October work session? I don't know what's on the docket,
We
but
don't have a work session before the business meeting.
So,
Yeah.
the question, well,
First, we have.
we have a, it's not on the calendar, the executive session, I think it's being added, right, for a second?
Yes.
Oh, negotiations, I think, that's what it is. I couldn't remember. So there's an update, but then we also have Kathy, we talked about the 6:45 for the interim superintendent qualifications.
Right.
So there would be a public hearing. I don't know that there would be a lot of time for a 6 to 7 work session for HYA.
I think it would be so the reasons why both firms talked about expediting is to make sure we got first.
Right.
And so I think it would be a really bad practice to set us back 2 weeks. The board doesn't have to approve a contract because it's under a threshold anyway.
Okay,
And so, right? And so I think the committee, I would think that the search committee or board leadership would have the capacity to enter the contract. And I would highly advise, even if it pushes a work session to 5 or 5:30, in order to facilitate that conversation, that's what I would be in favor of, to make sure we get on track. And stay as close to on track as possible.
okay, so I'll have that conversation and then, I will get,
You're talking about.
what's that?
To have things ready by then.
Yeah, October 2nd is the date we're.
Yeah, let me get a contract going, find out how long it'll take Elliot to get through with it, and then I'll talk to all of these things and then look to the committee to review it, to make sure we've captured the important elements. So I'll do that tomorrow. One thing, just bring, okay, it's all on this.
Okay,
Good, that's the plan. We will keep you updated.
Should I block out
I-
5 o'clock? You just
I feel like we should mark it at least.
We do that, sir?
Good. Well, hold on for 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
I point out that both firms said, we asked, tell me about a difficult superintendent search. They both pointed to board. As we enter that conversation, let's not start at the.
Not be there in San.
Yeah, carry on to their business.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, so we have that, we get back to the agenda. Search firm, so, yeah, so then.
So I wanted to just bring, while we are here for a conversation for the interim, there are,
We're not having a conversation about it. That's the conversation that we're having on October 2nd. We're not having a conversation.
I wanted to tell them what was happening on the second.
Okay, I want to make sure you didn't go any further than that. Okay, all right.
I'd like to talk about the process that we've defined
Perfect.
with dates for the interim, so that you're not surprised, particularly because the things that COSA say we have to do is have a public hearing with input on the qualifications, approve the qualifications. Chris and I met and came up with some. COSA gave us many more. I'll draft those. It is a draft. Please, please, please have your input. But then, COSA suggests that the entire board interview the candidates. And so it means that Sarah was going to do a doodle poll for dates so that we could get those on the calendar to have those interviews. That's what I wanted to
Okay,
just let you know that that's what's gonna happen when we get there. I think it was sometime later in October, like 27, 28. Sarah had gotten 2 or 3 dates, so that'll be important for all the board to participate in that.
And how are those applications or interests being submitted?
They'll be submitted to Sarah, and I went back on my notes with COSA. And again, it just kind of goes together between firms and interim. She said that we have to post it, but it does not and should not be like a week or 2, because the posting is not where we're gonna get our candidates. James already put in the Google Docs a list of eligible people. COSA went over that list with me and said there's a couple being considered, so they probably aren't on the list. There may be more that they bring in, but between COSA knowing everybody in Oregon, we're not gonna get anybody out of Oregon. I won't say that for the board, but that we should have a depth and breadth of pool to draw from, even though we may have the posting only open a day or two. And if we approve it, everything on Wednesday, and the posting goes out, COSA has given me that, I can just fill in our details and get that out to you. I mean, it's pretty much a COSA driven process. I'm just managing it a little bit. So that's the expectation just for the dates.
But interested candidates can apply and it will be reviewed by the.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
For sure, yes.
And in fact, COSA said, I mean, it depends on how many. I can't imagine we're gonna have 10 or 15. I have no idea what to expect, but they said first round, everybody, and then a second round. And the board, the entire board participates in
Okay, so on that, as Kathy said, then the public hearing part, it's how we typically do our budget hearing. We have to have it. It will be in the chamber. It's scheduled at 6:45. It'll be 15 minutes. People can speak to it, anyone to that one topic. So it's not public comment of anything else on our agenda. It is strictly qualifications, characteristics of the interim. And that's all it is. And then take that information and
which only means, and for clarification, if I throw a draft out there, qualifications and characteristics, you all would need to review that because we need to put it up for the public to review on the public hearing. So it would have to probably go out on Friday. So we're looking at 7 days between now and when it would have to be made public. Sarah, is that right?
Yeah. We have to post on the next Friday.
I can get you something, but then I really want your feedback and we can do that via email, or is that?
we can do it via email as long as it all goes directly to you, or if you want it to go to both of us, your
Oh,
choice.
yes, yeah.
To both.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we don't want to have you send it to the whole board and then David send it to the whole board because then we create a meeting. So send it back
Yeah.
to Kathy.
And I will draft it, you and I'll meet,
Okay,
solidify it, and then we'll. get it.
okay, all right,
Okay.
good. Um. So we did have, there's sorry, what time is it? Okay, let's wrap this up. So future board agenda topics, we've been going through, updating the spreadsheet, getting better notification for that, and also better scheduling of meetings so that we go over this. We were kind of waiting, not sure what I don't remember what we talked about, why we were not meeting, but we'll make sure that we do that on a regular basis to check. And we were also going through and identifying either ones that we've already done or ones that should have been gotten back to where we put it on there and said it's not gonna be reviewed for one reason or another. So we've been, I think, cleaning that up.
Yeah, and Chris and I, at our last leadership meeting, we were gonna call people and ask, and I know I've not done them. So I'll get right on that.
Yes.
Could I ask on the 6:45, it's, the public hearing is on interim superintendent qualities?
Yep. Qualities and quality, yes, that's the way that,
We have to work it.
COSA, yeah, it's a strange word, so that,
Which will probably be defined by qualifications and characteristics, because that's
Right.
everything
And then-
that's what we're doing, yeah.
yeah, yeah. It is a little bit of a strange word, but it's also strange that we have to do that.
I have one other.
Yes.
Yes, I know we're all tired. I want to just throw this out here. And James, you might have more information about this than I do, but I went to a chamber meeting where somebody talked about measure 118 that's going to be on the November ballot. And it is a gross receipts like the cat tax. It's going to be horribly regressive. But apparently, and I wanted to find this out, but again, I just didn't have time. It is going to have a potentially very negative impact to schools because it's in the general fund. Ricky Ruiz, our legislator was there, and he said he's the new chair of the education committee. And he said, this is really bad for schools. And I'm like, how exactly? And then he said stuff about general fund, and I wanted to know more specifically about it. My point was, we have taken for and against on measures on the ballot, so I just wanted to put it out there to the board. And I did suggest to the guy, he was from, I don't remember where he's from, that if they talk to boards, I mean, if it's gonna impact us, we need to be more vocal, so. If you wanna do your research, if you decide we want to, we should do it on October 2nd, so that I can get out there before the election, if you choose to, but I just.
Okay.
Give you that as a consideration.
116.
118.
So, okay. That it? So, let's see. I don't know what the date was to get our registration in. OSBA annual convention is coming up. It's held in Portland, November 8th and 9th. It's open to all school board members to attend. I think I have to get my registration in. So that's coming up rapidly. I don't have any other topics that we have to do.
The only thing I want to say is kudos to Sarah, because she has spent so much time helping me do all of this that I'm sorry. You've done a great job and your responses.
So this ticks off one more meeting that James.
Yeah.
All right.
And happy birthday, we didn't say
Happy
happy
birthday. Everything. Thank you for the cupcakes.
Couldn't figure out any other way I wanted to spend my.
I think we're doing another evaluation.
Yes. Let's wrap this up. So, announcements. So we have on October 2nd, we have a special work session scheduled at 6. Also on October 2nd, and that'll be in the council chambers conference room, public safety and schools building. We have the interim superintendent qualities hearing at 6:45 on October 2nd in the council chamber, public safety and schools building. That will be a public comment section just on that one item. And then we will follow that up with our regular board business meeting at 7 p.m. in the council chambers of public safety and schools meeting. And I believe we have no other business before the board. Thank you for all of your work tonight and to the committee. And we are adjourned at 9:06. Thank you.